We are going to talk about leadership today. So, let me start with a question. Those of you who believe that are leaders, raise your hands. Okay. Percentage-wise, what would it be what? About 20%? Something like that. Okay. Tell me, why do you believe that you are a leader?
Well, I believe I'm a leader because I help everyone who I work with to achieve their full potential. So that's my goal in life, basically.
You are helping people with whom you work to develop.
Yeah, to achieve
That's
their full potential.
that's according full potential. You know, full potential you never reach it.
So I just help.
But you know,
That's important.
you should. But we shall try for it. Okay. Somebody else. I would like to have some more opinions. Do you believe you are a leader?
Me?
Yeah.
A servant one, I would say.
Somebody else who believes he is a leader, he or she. Huh? Don't worry, I'm not. Okay, thank you.
I think I'm doing things that no one has tried before and leading by example.
Okay, you lead by example. This is the. Okay, so, you know, bounded leadership. Why such a title? Huh? Tell me.
That's difficult for everyone to be the perfect leader or to do it in every scenario that you have. And sometimes when a person that is taking a leadership role is somehow bounded to his own vision, his own experience, his own environment.
Oh, that's a good answer. That's a good answer. I think myself, you know, I was a long time ago when I was at Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, I had the privilege to work with the Nobel Prize winner Herbert Simon. And Herbert Simon got his Nobel Prize for the theory of bounded rationality. The main idea behind it was that you are never capable of making 100% rational optimum decisions. Because you are bounded, because you are limited by many factors. And in order to overcome those constraints, you have to be aware of them. As simple as that. And later on, when I got involved in a research on leadership, gradually I came to the conclusion that the idea of my mentor can be applied to leadership as well. Why? Because it's almost impossible to develop full leadership potential. You're always constrained. And that's why my first attempt to study leadership was in the US with my two ladies, co-authors, Mary Jo Hatch and Monica Costera. We studied about 40 interviews with, I would say, global top management, top leaders in business. And we came to the conclusion that in order to be a leader, you have to wear 3 masks. Mask of a manager, somebody who is capable of doing things, efficient. A mask of an artist, somebody who is creative, who is capable of developing new things, new ideas, new horizons. And the third mask, a mask of a priest. Someone who is capable of managing values. People believe in and people live by. And we published a book which had the title The 3 Faces of Leadership, Manager, Artist, Priest. This book was translated into a couple of languages, including Chinese. So I believe some 50 million Chinese have read it. But when I go to China, I never can find one who read it. But you know, that's a question of probability. Anyway, and it was also translated into Polish. But I was not satisfied with it. Why? Because when I presented these ideas to practicing managers, to the people in general, they would say, oh, you know, it's easy to say that you have to wear 3 masks. But first of all, we don't know when to wear each mask. And the second, we don't know where we can buy them. Where is the shop? So, you know, it's a nice idea, but not very practical. That's how they said. So I decided to go on, to continue. And in a couple of years ago, 2013, I started interviewing in depth top leaders in this country, in Poland. I interviewed Lech Wałęsa and Aleksander Kwaśniewski and a couple of prime minister and deputy prime ministers, ministers of finance, top managers, people who were managing large companies, private companies, but also people who were leading in arts, like for example, Antoni Witt, director of the Warsaw Philharmonic Orchestra, like Emilian Kamiński, the guy who is an actor and director who is running his own theater called Kamienica in Warsaw, and Czesław Lang, the guy who is running the Tour de Pologne, etc., etc. And I came to the conclusion that the essence of leadership is coping with constraints, pushing them aside. And very few people are really capable of doing it. Later on, this year, I started interviewing, this time electronically, much larger group of people, mostly managers, but also using so-called 360 degrees, their subordinates, and the results I will show you. But first of all, before I start telling you about the results, I want to ask once again a question. Do you feel constrained as leaders or not? Maybe I got it wrong. Huh? If so, probably some of you do feel constrained. What kind of constraints? What are the limits you're touching? Huh? Nobody here? Huh?
That's usually, I have not vision as it is in reality.
Uh-huh.
I mean, so that, yeah, it's not a question of vision, not a matter of tools or methodologies of what to do, but one of the things that I see that sometimes I really miss the point. Because I look to the things as I'm usual, let's say, and it's difficult for me to take a look to the team, to the department as it should be done. That is correct.
It's a cognitive constraint in a way, isn't it?
It's a cognitive constraint.
Yeah, that's certainly important one. Some other constraints.
Available assets, the whole environment which is connected with us. We are not alone on the world, but everything is
Yeah.
influencing our daily business. So it's also some
Material constraints.
Yes, of
Yeah,
course.
yeah.
team
Resources.
members,
Resources. You are not capable of mobilizing sufficient resources at a given moment of time. That's, yeah. Other ideas?
Also for personal character or attitude to the people,
Uh-huh.
social skills, let's say.
Personal. Yeah. You know, as they say, nobody is perfect, not even me. So, what it really means that each one of us has his or her own limitations. Like, for example, communication skills. Some people are better at that. Some people are not. Of course, communication skills can be developed by proper training, experience, etc. Other people have, I would say, knowledge limitations. They simply do not know what's going on. You are in a very special kind of industry. As far as I understand, most of you are in the IT industry. And in the IT industry, I was involved in it also to some extent. So, according to what I know, is that higher you get promoted, less you know. Why? Because the state of the art is constantly developing. Those people below you, are busy doing things you are not always capable of understanding. But you have to lead them. You have to manage them. Without full knowledge of what they are doing. It's not easy. But some people are very good at that. One of my interviewees was Adam Gural. He is the guy who certainly does not understand every details of the things which were done by his people, but he's capable of leading them very successfully. Why? Huh? Why some people are capable of leading the others without understanding fully the content of their jobs, and some are not. What? Charisma is very important, of course. But charisma is a little bit magic. So it is something which is hard to define. German sociologist and philosopher Max Weber coined this notion of charisma. And German philosophy is not very easy to understand. So you don't really know what it is, but you can relatively easily decide who has charisma and who has not. There are some people who are charismatic, but not forever. The most charismatic leader in my set of interviewees was undoubtedly Lech Wałęsa. A great leader. Probably, I would say, the giant. But he lost his charisma. He doesn't have it anymore. And he's fully aware of that. He's smart enough to understand that he lost his charisma. He's not happy with it, of course. But it can happen to any one of us who has certain degree of charisma. So charisma is important. But what else is important to lead the people who are doing things you don't fully understand? What? Trust. None?
Trust.
I don't know. Maybe. But substantiate it. Why?
When we trust people, they can do better things, big things.
When you trust people, that's a, you know, trust is a very nice word. But in our country, it's just a word. We are consistently the least trusting of Europeans. We don't trust anyone. I don't trust you, you don't trust me. Why? That's a long history. I'm not ready to tell you why. But that's fact. And some people say that trust is a necessary component of economic development. If trust was a necessary component of economic development, we would be below Zimbabwe. And we are not. So, trust helps. But it's not necessary. There is a number of substitutes of trust. Many substitutes. So people, leaders, have to be aware of that. And they have to use it. And sometimes the substitute of trust are dirty tricks. And leaders, to be successful, have to use them. This is something which is, you know, sometimes it's a blackmail. If you don't do that, I will do that to you. Okay? It's a blackmail. Sometimes it's tacit, sometimes it's open. There are many other tricks. The use of brute force. People are forced to do certain things. It's not good, by the way. It's very bad. But sometimes it's necessary. So, this leads me, this idea of trust you have raised, leads me to the problem of ethics. All my interviewees, both in this relatively small sample of very high-ranking leaders, and in much larger sample, they said that they are confronted with moral dilemmas, with moral issues. And all of them said that they have certain, I would say, red line they wouldn't cross. But this red line is sometimes far away from conventional morality. And that's individual question. Being a leader, you have to admit that from time to time you will get your hands dirty. There is no... Now let me show you... Where is this? Oh. Does it work? Yes, it does. How nice. You know, I am accustomed to technology always fails, but this time it didn't. So, what we have here? We have leadership typology. And let's start with the leadership sources. First, political. Of course, you should not understand them, I would say, political, because every elected official, like, for example, you know, rector of public university, his source of power is political. His source of leadership is political because he has been elected by his peers and students and by the whole community, and he had to pay for that. Nothing comes for free. Okay? That's politics. In politics, you get something in exchange of something. Otherwise, it doesn't work. Nothing comes for free. Then you have institutional source of leadership, which basically means that you have been nominated by some higher authority to leadership position. This is typical situation in big corporations, in public administration, in organizations, formal organizations, where people are being promoted. And of course, it's not a very strong source of leadership. Why? What?
It's not a long time.
Not for a long time, that's a good point, but something else.
They don't have real followers.
Yes, that's very important. In order to be a real leader, you need real followers. If you don't have followers, you might have very high position, but you are not a leader. And that's something which has to do with leadership skills. I'll tell you later about them. And then, entrepreneurial. This is very powerful source of leadership because entrepreneurs are the people who are capable of creating something out of nothing. That's my definition of entrepreneurship. You know, it's not a big deal to inherit a lot of money and to lose half of it and be a big boss. The real thing, and they say that Mr. Trump would be 3 times as rich if he would put all the money he has inherited from his father on savings account in a bank. But he says he is a great entrepreneur. Maybe. We'll see. I hope not. I hope not. But anyway, entrepreneurs are the people who have created something. And let me tell you, the most powerful leaders I have interviewed are the ones who have created their organizations, who were at the very beginning, at the birth of the company, of the bank, of a foundation, etc. So, entrepreneurial. Then you have expertise-based leadership. Experts become leaders. This is probably this is common in your field. However, it's a very, I would say, it's a very thin ice on which such leaders are walking. Why? Because they have to divide their time between developing their expertise and leading people and managing. And usually, the tasks of management are more urgent, let's put it in this way. So they do not have time to upgrade their knowledge. That's why it is very unwise, let's put it in this way, to name big scholars presidents of universities, the most talented medical doctors, directors or CEOs of hospitals, because they are losing their expertise. They don't have enough time to catch up with rapidly developing knowledge and at the same time running the company. You know? Warsaw University has a budget of roughly 1 billion zlotys. It's not very much as compared with American universities, but it's quite a company, okay? And if you run it, you don't have time to read learned articles in academic journals. And you are lagging behind. So you have to substitute, sooner or later, you will lose your leadership, or you will have to substitute it with something else, with some other sources of leadership. And the last one is spiritual. Spiritual leaders, those who are capable of managing, creating values, and inspiring people. I had the privilege to meet John Paul II couple of times. And he was a great spiritual leader, but at the same time, rather poor manager. So spiritual leadership is something very special. But even in business, people like, I don't know, legendary Steve Jobs were spiritual leaders because they were capable of creating values and using the values to inspire people and to lead them. The Pope Francisco is another example of a spiritual leader, completely different. Okay, let's go to the sources, to competencies leaders might have to have. Number one is anticipatory. They have to anticipate the future. And this is very difficult. In your field, for example, you have this disruptive technologies. Okay. What's your problem? Oh, okay. You help it. You help him. Don't worry, don't worry. Nie bój się. Okay. So, anticipating the future is very difficult, particularly in rapidly developing fields like yours. You know, my good friend of mine is running at one of the best technological universities in the US, Rensselaer Polytechnic in New Jersey. He is running a program, research program, which has a very striking title. Personality of robots. It's a very serious program, very well financed. Guess by whom? What? Yes, of course, Department of Defense. It is top secret, so I don't know anything about it, but he never told me. But the only thing he told me is that robots, machines, have personalities already. Fully autonomous units. Oh my God. Can you imagine? An armed drone operating independently with personality, a good person or bad or nasty one? So, and that's your field. Artificial intelligence is something you are already facing, of course. But it's going to progress very rapidly. So anticipation is very important. Then visionary. The ability, somebody has mentioned in a discussion, the ability to create visions. And, you know, visions have to be mobilizing and simple. If somebody comes to you and makes a PowerPoint presentation of 50 slides and tells you that this is his vision of Poland, doubtful. Why? Because in order to be mobilizing, the vision has to be simple, transparent, and then it can become elaborate later on. But creating visions is something which is very difficult because you are on the boundary of daydreaming. And daydreaming is extremely dangerous. Isn't it? Okay, value creating. You need, in order to be a real leader, you have to be able to create values to a certain degree. Sometimes the values might be simple. Like, for example, cleanness is a value. In some industries, like in healthcare or restaurant, hospitality, of course, it's an important element. Simple little thing. But sometimes it's much more powerful. Like customer focus, like empathy. And these values drive the followers, because the next competence is mobilization, mobilizing. There are very few, mobilizing people is something which is difficult because, you have to be able to make your people work late hours, in weekends, do things which sometimes neglect their families, and they should be happy to do that. That's the most. Of course you can force them. You can force people to do anything, A little concentration camp can be created in a workplace. And in some workplaces it is being created. But these people have to be happy to do that. And that's not easy. Some people can do it. Some others can't. And I still remember, when I know an organization when people used to work long hours, and they have nominated new boss. I'm coming late in the afternoon, nobody's there. So I ask somebody whom I know, and she says, for this guy, I'm not going to work late hours. No reason. For the other one, yes. And then, self-reflection. Oh my God, that's difficult. Because we love ourselves. We believe that we are great, that we have no weaknesses. We make no mistakes. And if you really are in love with yourself, and this love is reciprocated, you will never become a leader. Okay, so I think I'm coming to an end, but my advice is try to diagnose yourself using these categories. Try to answer honestly a question. How good leader I am? Because degree of leadership can be very highly variable. That's me. Look. Look. This is the ranking of 29 people I have interviewed. And the highest rank is 930 something. The lowest is 354. All these people are recognized as leaders. They have very high positions, but their leadership skills are some of them, in a matter of fact, I wouldn't call them leaders. Of course, I would never tell anyone who is number 1 and who is number 8. Because I have committed myself to very strict confidentiality. But that's how this population looks like. So you can probably move higher if you diagnose yourself properly. What? Oh, these are the indexes of this leadership strength and the ability to overcome constraints. It's complicated, but statistically I've done a little bit of work in this. But unfortunately we don't have time. But if you are really interested, you can look at my book, which is called Ograniczone Przywództwo. It was published 2 or 3 years ago. And a couple of articles as well. In English, it was published an article in Polish Sociological Review, and now it is under review in some international journals. Anyway, so thank you very much for your attention and for your participation. Thank you very much.